with the presentation by Zhi. We will present something where we mix the input-output approach, and we enrich this approach with firm-level data in order to look more into the heterogeneity, not at firm level, but at industrial level. So please, Zhi, you have, well, you asked me for a bit more, so 30 minutes, but 30 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. First, I need to thank UNSD and INICE to put together this wonderful conference. So bring together experts all over the world together to exchange ideas on this lot of very important questions that face the scientific community. Today, I want to give an example, as Herbert just mentioned. This is a joint work with Professor Hong Ma from Tsinghua University and Dr. Kunfu Zhu from Chinese Academy of Science. As a US federal employer, before I speak anything, I have to say this presentation is only my own opinion. It's not in any means represent the US government and the US International Commission and its commissioners. So let's start. I first want to outline what we did in this study. Oh, how you say? Basically, what we do is we first decompose the gross exports of a country into domestic and foreign value added by ownership type and the trade region. Then we estimate the factor ownership by firm type based on firm-level data to further study how domestic value added generated from the production of exports is distributed among two various factor owners, thus we can qualify the gross national income generated from the exports. In order to doing so, we split every sector in the conventional input-output table into several sub-accounts, incorporating firm heterogeneity into the IO-based standard approach. The purpose is to reduce aggregate bias. I was talking about what is the aggregation bias in measuring domestic value added in exports. Then we develop an estimation procedure, basically it's an optimization model to estimate the volume of inter-firm transaction flow. So our data is based on Chinese data because I have more, because I origin from China, so I have better access to Chinese data. But the methodology can be used to any countries as long as the data is available. If I have time, I will talk a little bit about the history of this methodology. So, as a researcher, every researcher, if you're doing research for your life, you will love what methodology you developed, what methodology you used. However, we also, as a scientist, we have to realize any scientific methodology have limitations. So if you go beyond what your methodology can do well, then you will get terrible stuff, you will make big mistakes. So the IO methodology is because of Liang Tiff, he got the Nobel Prize. What it's best for is can estimate indirect value added, or the embed emissions, or embed resource use. Because that's no, right now, based on my knowledge, is no alternative ways can help us to solve this issue. However, they have strong and very serious significant limitations in IO methodology. Because everybody, Fabienne already mentioned this, but I want to emphasize, especially if somebody from the trade background or not from national account. Because in the IO input-output model, we assume just have one single homogeneous production technology exist for all the forms and all the products they produce in the same industry classifications. So a single average production technology is assumed to produce the entire output of the industry. We know this is definitely not true. In reality, different firms, even those firms produce the same products located in different locations in same country. They're using different technology. That's the intuition that everybody knows this phenomena. Therefore, any kind of I/O results will create a bias. We call this bias aggregation bias. If you want to use the I/O technology, you have to encounter this kind of bias. What we can do, we cannot eliminate them total, because any empirical applications, you have to do some aggregation, even at a very detailed level. For example, I have working in BEA, so I know US have the capacity to publish more than 1,000 industries, but the BEA never do this. Why? Because as the disaggregation increase, the associated measurement error also increase. So they have to guarantee their publication data have a certain accuracy. So the average benchmark table, you only can see about less than 500 sectors. For the annual table, you only have 65 sectors. It's not the BA do not have the data. They can give you the detail, but the quality, they cannot guarantee to you. So what a statistician can do is trying to identify what is the most important heterogeneities, contribute to the aggregate bias within limited resources, because we have budget constraints, we have staff constraints, we have time constraints. We cannot do 5,000 products, like say trade data. That is infeasible. So I just want to show the importance to take into account the heterogeneity of form. I give you example here is a final use of imports from Chinese data. It's 2007. You see, here you see basically in the column titles, I have the import inventory goods, import capital goods, and the share of exports. In the row, I have the foreign-owned form, I have state-owned form, I have Chinese provider form. Then the last row gives you the average of the usage. You can see the trade behavior between foreign-owned form and the Chinese domestically owned form are very different. So for the foreign form, about 60% their imports is used to produce exports, which have 84% is processing exports. But for Chinese domestic form, they are different. They're still different. The SOE and the provider form are different. But a larger portion is about 70% is used in the normal production, like they produce normal exports and the domestic sales. And their processing export share are very different. So that is really different, really different. We have taken into account this kind of heterogeneity. Then I give a Mexico example. Okay. The data I used is the 2003 Mexico input-output table. That's we really appreciate our Inige colleague gave us this data. Okay, their data have the domestic economy and the Macindola economy. Okay, we use that data. The data give us is 2 levels. At the 3-digit NICS, 73 industries. At the 4-digit level is 256 industries. The disaggregation tripled. However, if you see the HIV method, people if not familiar with this terminology, basically it's Professor Hamel, they have a paper in 2001, JIE, using the I/O table to estimate the vertical specialization or the import content of exports. Basically, they didn't distinguish processing trade and normal trade. They put the trade together. Okay? If you see in a three-digit I/O table, what is Mexico manufacturer's domestic content? It's about 51%. When you go to the 265 sectors, you have 53.4%, 2% increase. However, you see the other we call KWW method. Basically, I was an author with my boss, Bob Koopman, and Professor Shang Jinwei at Columbia University. That's we basically, the similar methodology applied to this example, but some modifications. Okay, so what you can see is if the upper bound, the lower bound basically is 45%, that's we only treat Macadola exports as the processing exports. We treat the PDEX as normal exports. But if we add in the PDEX, right now the Mexico State Agency measure them together, called IMEX. This morning, my Mexico colleague presented their results. You see, what is the domestic content for Mexico? It's 29% or 30%, lower 30%. But if from the 73 industry go to the 256 industries, you get the increase for 3%, to go to 33%. That's what the industry classification can give you, increase the accuracy. But very important, this example shows the institutional arrangement is very important. Why? I don't know for statisticians, for economists, we think about incentives. Because different incentive arrangement give people different behaviors. The behavior are different. That's reflect to their technology, their production technology. That's the reason drive the difference. So it is important take the institutional arrangement first before you go to further disclassification of industries, because that gives you a very big heterogeneity. You have to take into account. Otherwise, we will increase your aggregate bias. Okay, so that's the ideas. So what do we do here? So what do we do differently with what we did in the previous study? One I did with Koopman and Shang Jin. One is did for the USTR, for the small forms. At that kind of two applications, we know what the target. We just want to separate processing and no processing. That's in Chinese application. For the US application, we just want to split the large form and the small and middle-sized form. It's very clear. There's no need any justifications. But right now, we want to find, because we are statisticians, so we want to first find some statistical evidence. Why you divide the form to different groups? What is the basis? So that's this time we adding a little bit of statistical flour to justify. We split the form into 4 categories. So basically, because here you say in different studies, the form heterogeneity are different. For example, in Arnold's application, it's very important for the resource disaggregation. He have different purpose, so the heterogeneity for him are different. For us right now, to estimate the domestic content of exports, the most important thing is the import use intensity. Why? Very intuitive, because if you use more import as intermediate goods, your domestic value will decrease. If you not using imports as independent inputs, your total domestic value added. Okay? So that's these key variables. That's what we have to try to identify what is the major heterogeneity from the macro level data. So in order to do this, we combine 2 databases. One database we call the annual survey of industrial production. Basically, it's the enterprise survey data. As from the National Statistical Bureau from China. That's 2007, they have 300,000 enterprises. Okay, that's only above 13 level for 5 million yuan sales. But that's have 300 million totals. Then the second data set is the firm-level export and import transaction data from China customers. So we measure these two. Basically, from the first data set, we only have one variable related to trade. That's the export delivery. So we identify 92,000 firms engaged in export. The export number is not zero. Then we split the firm into 4 groups. It's processing export firm of Chinese-owned firm, the processing exporters of foreign firm, the normal exporter and the domestic sellers for Chinese firm, and the same for the foreign firm, the 4 types. That's the structure of the exports, total exports, not breaking by commodity. You say 35% is normal export and domestic sales by Chinese-owned firms, but 44% is the foreign-owned firm, but carry on processing trade. So sum together, the Chinese-owned firm only take about 44% of Chinese total exports, where the foreign firm take about 56% of Chinese export at 2007. Then we did some summary statistics. You can see we totally have 92,000 firms. You see the Chinese processing firm only have about 4,000 in our sample, but the majority of Chinese firm is more than 41,000, about 42,000. They do some exports, but very little, but they import very little, okay? If you say the mean, you say, for the Chinese processing firm, in average, 40% of their independent inputs is from foreign sources. But for the Chinese normal firm, what do? They only have less than 3,000%. But if you see by the percentage, by the percentile, you say, what we thought is by the export amount, you say the top 10% even is zero. Only the less than 1% in the 41,000 firm, that's less than 1% their imports, their input come from imports. But if you see the different characters, you see for the foreign processing firm, average is 44%. But the top 10% is 90%. Their input is come from foreign source. Okay, that's quite different. So that's where you justify why we're doing this. Why you don't further separate the Xi'an form, the Chinese-owned normal form, further exporters and no exporters. I will explain more later on. Then we conduct a formal statistical test, they call SCAFE multiple comparison test. All the group means are significantly different from each other. Within processing exports, the foreign-owned firm, on average, using significantly more imported inputs over total exports as compared with Chinese processing firms. Within foreign-owned firm, normal firm, on average, using significantly less proportion of imported inputs than foreign processing firms, and so on. Basically, they are very, very different, very, very different. I'm not going to the details. Okay. Then people will question me, you say, as the literature going to separate the exporters and no exporters. In China, some of my colleagues in the Chinese academic science, they also did this kind of work. They're trying to further split the normal normal forms into exporters and no exporters. What we didn't do in these studies for 2 major reasons. First reason is a lack of data to estimate the L coefficient. As I mentioned, we have totally 300,000 Chinese total enterprises in the data, but only 92,000 of them are exporters. For the for the exporters, especially for the domestic, for the other part of the 210,000 forms, we don't have any information about how their input is sourced. We don't have that information. I believe the NBS have some industry, the input-output survey data. They might provide additional information, but I did not access of this data. That's the first reason, because we have to do things based on data availability. If no data, you cannot do anything. Second, and also important, as I mentioned, is the incentive scheme. People who are familiar with Chinese trade arrangement, you will know the processing exporters enjoy a lot of privileges. Basically, everything imported by the processing importer, legally, they cannot sell at the domestic market, unless the domestic buyer is another processing firm. Okay, legally it cannot, not permit. If they do this, they have to get penalty. Okay? But what benefit they get is not only the duty-free, they also get a value-added tax-free. This value-added tax ranges from 30% to 70% of the total value of the goods. It's a very large chunk of incentives. In addition, if they classify this form as a processing form in customer's book, then he will enjoy just free, just go free from the customer. If you not classify our processing form, if you later on you export, you can enjoy a rebate, but the rebate usually take a very long time. It's a delayed years, months or years. So I talking a lot of the customers, officials, and the entrepreneurs. They said, if we can be classified as a processing importer, why not? Give us so big incentive. That's as long as the firm have a export contract, they will do everything possible, become a processing traders. For these two reasons, we not further split them, because one, we don't have data. Second, even we can do this, they might not change the estimation results very much. The effort may not worth the cost. That's the reason we didn't do this. Okay? So we know domestic value added is value added generated by domestic producers. This includes value added generated by all type enterprises operating in domestic territory. It's a concept consistent with the country's GDP statistics. This is territory-based production concept. However, these concepts are different from how the value added generated from production is distributed to different factor owners, such as the workers' compensation and the capital profits. This is a very different issue, which need to convert domestic value added generated from the export production to gross income to various factor owners, thus can contribute to the country's gross national income. So these two different concepts. So in order to further identify the gross national income, what we do is we use the combined database, because in the Chinese enterprise survey data, that give you their financial shirt. They give you paid-in capital. They have a structure. You know, for example, this Form A totally have 1 million renminbi's capital, physical capital. Then you will know how much the 1 million capital is come from foreign countries, or from Macau, Taiwan, or Hong Kong, or from domestic firms. You know these structures. So you can use this structure to compute the distribution of the profit. Okay? Then we also use the balance of payment data that's compiled by the central bank. That gives us additional information, because that's the internal information. Fortunately, the MAFCOM leads this effort. So we have a 4-agency cross-agency cooperation. They have the customers, they have NBS, they have the SIF, we call the State Exchange Management Bureau. They compile the BOP statistics. They have by sector information. So basically, we use the income transfer information from the domestic value added from foreign factor to factor owners. More specifically, we use the sector level income tables. Basically, is the expenditure side of the BOP. So foreign investment income account for about 95% of the total foreign factor income. So that's how we distribute the value added to the domestic and the foreign factor owners. So basically, I'm very briefly here. So what data is available? You see the red box basically is what are the data we need to estimate. The black column in the last two columns in the table, and the bottom is basically is the exports and the gross output. That's non-data. That's you combine with the IO table and also with the macro data you have. You have that data for certain. For the blue bar, basically the data, we have partial of the information. We have to estimate. For example, for the final demand consumed by Chinese domestically, you say basically you have the import final goods. That's what we basically identify by the BEC classification. BEC classification. We know how much the imports is used as final goods or capital goods. Then you from the total final use minus the import, you get a domestic. But we don't know it's produced by domestic owned form or foreign form. We have to estimate simply that. In the value added, we have the similar situation as partial information. But what information is missing is in the middle of the red square. So basically, what we have is for the first four columns, because I mentioned the processing firm is not allowed them to sell at the domestic market. So that's raw. 2 raw is 0. Okay. What we need to do? We need from the one domestic use table split to 8 tables for the Z's. Okay. But for the import table, we have 1. We need to split to 4. That's what we need to do. But for the import table, we have more information from trade side. So what we need to estimate is basically this. So I develop a mathematical program model can doing this. Everything is automatic. So I don't want to go to details. I just want to show the results. You say, that's the distribution of domestic value added by form type. You see, basically you can see the first row is the proportion of gross exports. You can Chinese owned form is 35% is normal in normal exports, but the domestic value added about 50% is come from there. Okay, but the processing form is 8%, but in terms of value added, less than 5%. For the processing foreign form, domestic value added is 44%, but the in exports, gross exports is 44%, but the domestic value added, because they're using more imports, only 27%. On average, is about 57% is from the foreign form. The 43% is from the domestic form. That's basically the domestic value added distribution. But this distribution will be very different. Okay, let me go back to the sector results. I want to give this first. Okay, see this graph. Okay, that means we further transfer the domestic value added into factory income, into national gross income. For example, this graph shows you $100 Chinese exports. They will have 59 cents is domestic contents or domestic value added. Then 41% is foreign value added. However, in the 49% of the domestic value added, is 32% is come from the Chinese domestic owned firms. 27% is come from the foreign firms. So in Chinese-owned firms, most all the domestic value added go to domestic income, only very little. That's because they also employ some of foreign managers. So they also take some foreign income, very, very small, less than 0.5%. Okay? But you see the difference is the foreign-owned firm, the 27% of domestic value added, you say, only have 15 cents, 15% is go to Chinese domestic income. About 12% is go to foreign income. So at the end, $100 Chinese exports, $47 is go to Chinese gross national income. $53 go to foreign income. That's basically the results. But if you see this kind of split, you'll see the COE, the Chinese-owned firm, have much higher share in domestic value added, especially in the processing form. But a very large portion of that means the domestic value added and the domestic income, the share are very close. But for foreign firms, the domestic value added and the domestic income are very different. That's basically the point. So some kind of results here is for the sector level. You can see, okay, basically the basic message here is too many numbers. You see, for the sophisticated products, usually have very low domestic value shares. So that means this have a normal question, you see, is we should pursue of high domestic value added, or we need to think about high domestic value added definitely is a good thing for development, or is not a good thing, not necessarily a good thing for development. Because you see, this table gave you all the low-tech sectors, they have very high domestic value added. So we need to think about these questions. Okay? Let me conclude. So we explore the usefulness of firm-level production and trade data to reduce the aggregation bias in measuring domestic value added in a country's gross exports. We also explore the statistically meaningful way of separating different groups of firms within an industry based on available macro data collected by national statistical agencies. All this data is available, just how to access them, okay? We extend the KW and Chen et al.'s methodology by considering firm ownership, thus enable us to measure the distribution of domestic value added in exports across domestic and foreign factor owners. So we develop a concept similar to we measure the concept of gross national income. We found that foreign firm operating in China create nearly 45% of the domestic value added in Chinese exports, where the processing Chinese firm only create about 5%. In terms of income distribution, about 22% of the value added of Chinese exports was captured by foreign factor owners. That's basically our conclusion. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. I mean, it's a very rich, a very dense presentation, and I must say something. It's not the first time. Zhi is somebody very well known in the circus of trade in value added. Frankly speaking, you were on time, Zhi. Good. And the results are interesting in many instances. When we speak about firm heterogeneity and the risk of mistake we may have from aggregation bias, which was the topic of the presentation, it's a bigger issue in developing countries than in the developed country where we saw, in the sense that when Germany built a car, it will be more or less the same car for domestic market and for export. So the production technology is the same, basically. You will have differences between small firms, large firms, etc. But in many developing countries, the type of product and the technology used to produce them will be totally different according to the orientation, either towards domestic market or exportation. And what we saw here is really interesting. I was a bit surprised by the result you got, in the sense that foreign firms involved in processing are generating more domestic value added than Chinese firms working for processing. This is not intuitive, let's put it that way. And for the people interested more in the statistical process, this is the result of a huge teamwork in China that perhaps, I mean, if you have questions, Zhi could explain more, or the colleagues from China could explain more, but it's really interesting. After that, if we have some time for a question on Zhi's presentation first, and if you have some question more general to the panel, except myself, because I'm unable to answer any technical question, please feel free. Okay, I see first Nori and...
Thank you. I was going to ask for the previous two presentation. As a user, if we want to use tech and the S-tech, I was wondering if there might be some double counting issues or overestimated issues, because trading services may include some of the trade involved with goods trade statistics. So do you have some idea how we can reconcile in terms of a SNA-based perfect world?
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation and congratulations for the work. It's very fascinating. My question is only on one point. I didn't well understood how do you pass from trade to income. It's not obvious for me. I explain. In my view, in my own view, from trade to income, there would have been revenues outside as dividends, but also patents, royalties, maybe interest on capital, etc. So, but if we take it into account, it would be very difficult to attribute it to one product, because we only know it at an enterprise level, legal unit or enterprise group, but a multi-product entity. So how can you pass from that to that?
Thank you. Perhaps you can answer those two questions. After that, we'll do another round of...
I have also a remark on what you said before, Hubert. Yes. About the heterogeneity, and also it was present in what showed Fabian. Because I think that we don't have to think separating foreign and domestic. Because within domestic, there is a huge heterogeneity, even in developed country. For example, if you take food preparation and beverage, in France, you will have the bakery of the corner and the big enterprise multinational. And the average does not tell something very interesting. And in terms of policymakers, they will say, oh, foreign capital is very good, very productive, and domestic capital is not. And it's wrong, because maybe multinational foreign-owned and multinational domestically owned are very close. So the problem is another one, and the others are very different. So even for developed country, we have to separate and to take account of heterogeneity inside domestic-owned companies.
Okay. I will answer that later. But first, Zhi, because he's the main reference.
So let me answer the question in the back order. So I first answer my French colleague's question. If my understanding is correct, basically you're asking how you can attribute a traded goods, one product or from one sector, go back to the income level. So that's the usefulness of the SUT and IO technology. Basically, we have to assume, we have to make assumptions. I know the current SUT and IO technology is far from perfect. Assume you really count everything, include the royalty, license that's in service trade. You can catch those things. Then, because all these things you sell domestically or foreign, that's in final goods. Then the Liang-TIF have a methodology using the backward or forward industrial linkage to trace in each production stages how much production needed in different sectors, all sectors. Even you only concern is car, but steels, plastic, everything you will trace out. So that's give you an answer. So of domestic value added and foreign value added. That's only part of that's GDP question, is the production side. In order to further from the production side, go to the income, you have to attribute this domestic value added to different factor owners. So that's the next step. That's you have the capital structures, you need to have the employment structures, how many is foreign workers, how many is domestic workers, and how many is foreign capital, how many is domestic capital. If you have that information, you can readily distribute them to the income. That's what we did. Okay, inconsistent with BOP data. So that's your question. The second question is Nora's question is regarding about the reconciliation of the national account and the trade data. I think most of the question is raised by Nadim's presentation in the first day. Really, I'm working with Nora and Nadim for quite a long time. We have joined papers, and I also detailed to Paris for 3 months last year. What big trouble for us, you say, basically the SUT's trade data is different with the merchandise trade statistics, okay? And also the resident purchase abroad and the no recent purchase domestically, they are not consistent with the touristic data. So those data are very different. So we really hope the National Statistical Agency, at least you make your trade data and your national account data consistent. I think you can best do this than us, because you see, what we can do, we do something, we try to develop some kind of mathematical procedure, because so many countries, we have no such kind of manpower to go each sale of and the sales from the SUTs. That's really need the National Statistical Agency involved, give us inputs, help us to get better input data. So that's my question.
Thank you. There are two questions. One is, Ronald, you asked for, okay. So, microphone. Ronald, please.
Yes, thank you, Bear. Would like to thank all three presenters for the Fabienne, Luis, and Zhi for the very nice presentations. I first would like to come back to trade-in services. As you may know, we are working hard on the compilation guide for trade-in services, and Fabienne knows about that very well. We have a number of chapters on the data sources, which are used for compiling trade-in services. So that's also one of the main differences between the merchandise trade and trade-in services. Is merchandise trade is really still a lot of customs-based, maybe not as much in the EU, but in general a lot of customs-based. And services come from different sources. So my question to Luis is, in what way this affected also the ESTEC project in linking the services trade data to the business register. And then I also want to come back to the comment that Steve made, is that I do think also that this could be an opportunity for the TEC and ESTEC project to actually look at the asymmetries and see if looking at the details, because for instance on trading services within the EU, it's also well known that there are a lot of differences between Germany and France and others, and that the looking very closely at these detailed data might give some clues to that as well. Coming to my final remark and question is the heterogeneity, which actually Fabienne and both Zhi were showing, but Zhi, when you showed it in your presentation, going from the 3-digit to the 4-digit and finding that there are differences, my question would be, where would those differences coming from? So would it be size class, as Frederick also indicated, or would it be other kinds of systematic variables which could be an issue? And I don't know if you've considered this in the project, because you've looked at Chinese-owned foreign investment, but you could have taken other kind of differentiations within those classes. Thank you.
And the other question, and after that, you'll... Okay. Please.
Thank you. With regard to the study on China, which I think is really interesting, I have 3 brief remarks. The first is, how did you, in separating foreign from Chinese enterprises, how did you reflect the different rules with regard to FDI? I think in some sectors, it is allowed to have 100% foreign-owned enterprise, whereas in other sectors it's not. So in these other sectors where you have an ownership of less than 50% of foreign enterprise, is this in your study reflected as a Chinese-owned enterprise? Then secondly, in your final results, you only separate between Chinese and foreign-owned enterprises, while before you split the Chinese firms between state-owned enterprises and privately owned enterprises. And I wondered if you have some results also that reflect that. And with regard to the incentive structure that you mentioned, I think in the Chinese financial sector, you also have a large role played by the state-owned banks, and I think that state-owned enterprises have quite easy access to loans from state-owned banks. So is that perhaps also something that you would need to reflect on? And finally, does your study allow you to make any statement about the evolution over time? In the sense, has the domestic value added increased, or has it stagnated or fallen? Thank you.
Thank you very much. In order to give time to Zhi to think about all those questions, perhaps if Fabienne and Luis. Okay. You know, the lady are very gallant.
No.
I mean, Luis first, go.
Ask questions.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much for the questions. So actually there is something still pending from the colleague asking about the double counting in tech and STEC. Well, I would say that double counting is not really that important problem, and that from my point of view in tech and STEC. I mean, we have, I would say, more important problems from the quality point of view. I mean, Fabian has mentioned the issue of the wholesale sector, which actually is providing a picture which is not really correct, but we have to take into account that tech is actually indicating the enterprise that has recorded the export or the import, and it does not mean necessarily that that enterprise has really produced the good which is exported or consumed the good that has been imported. So from that point of view, there is already a limitation there. But there are other problems. We have the issue of free exports, we have the issue of quasi-transit, and also the issue that sometimes the data linking with complex enterprises in business register is not that easy to do with the data on trading goods or trading services. Now coming back to the issues mentioned by Ronald, he mentioned the issue of the different data sources used in trading services. Certainly, this is a big difference compared to trading goods. In trading services, we don't have a single data source for the collection of this information. As I mentioned in my presentation, we have enterprise surveys. This is one of the main sources, but not the only one. We have issues related with the financial services that go in a different direction. We have sectors like travel, where we basically depend on tourism statistics, which is another data source. And unfortunately, countries are not using the same sources for the same type of data collection. And this is a source of asymmetries that I will mention later. What we can do in the future is actually, in the future of ESTEC, is to isolate at least those sectors, services sectors, on which we can really construct solid statistics and say, okay, for those sectors we have enterprise surveys and we can do a good link to the information on the business register and on SBS statistics and so on. I think this should be the way to go. I mean, because those other sectors, services sector for which enterprises surveys are not used, it's going to be certainly more complicated. So let's go step by step, I would say. And on the asymmetries, yes, this is a well-known problem. We have been for a number of years in the European context trying to at least reconcile intra-EU trading services statistics. We have not been very successful, but again, as I just mentioned, it's a
Okay, Sis is back.
Yes? No?
Mine is back.
Thank you. So what I was saying is that it's... No? Ah, yes, okay.
Don't touch the microphone.
Okay, okay, fine. So we have a long tradition on trying to solve this problem of at least intra-EU asymmetries, but we have not been successful, as I was saying. The question of data sources is relevant. We are continuously making efforts. We have the same problem in trading goods, actually, so it's nothing that we can simply limit it to trading services, and in FDI as well, I mean, in foreign direct investment statistics. We have a project in FDI statistics which is actually aimed to reduce asymmetries by exchanging microdata between data compilers. And also in the field of trading goods, we have also a project for the future in order to allow this microdata exchange at intra-EU level. But we hope that it will help, but we are not sure we'll be able to solve. But we are very conscious of this situation, certainly. Thank you. You need the microphone.
Which one?
It works?
No? Yes. Yes. Thank you. Yes, just to comment first on Ronald's question. I think indeed that the tech and ESTEC data might be useful for analyzing the issue of asymmetries. In particular, if you consider the results that many companies, exporting and importing companies, only trade with one or two countries. And this is the type of information that we can use. Again, of course, if you want to resolve asymmetries, you have to do that as being engaged in exports or being part of an enterprise group that is engaged in exports. So, for example, if you would have a company or an enterprise group in your economy consisting of multiple enterprises. One is engaged in wholesale, one is doing the production, yet another one is the headquarter function, for example. The fact that the wholesale enterprise is sort of selling all the goods that were produced by the production enterprise, you cannot understand the activities of both these enterprises if you do not consider what the other one is actually doing. So we said, let's see if we can attribute an exporting status variable based not on the enterprise level but on the enterprise group level, and that reduced to some extent the problem with wholesale. So that might be something worthwhile to explore, maybe by other countries, to see if they can achieve similar results. And then as a final remark on Frédéric's question regarding heterogeneity, and you are very right. I focused in my presentation on exporting and non-exporting, and foreign-owned and non-foreign-owned. But clearly, among the domestic-owned, there is the big difference between those firms that are themselves internationally active compared to those firms that are fully domestically owned, and that is clearly the other dimension of fats, which is the outward fats dimension, that is equally important as the inward fats dimension. So that I did not mention this in my presentation was not because I do not completely agree with you on this point.
Thank you. Zhi, before?
So my question. Okay. So I have 4 questions. I also answer in the back order. I think the question is very good about the evaluation of the change and the changing patterns of the domestic value added, especially for different form types. So the work so far we only did for 2007, but we are working on the data back to 1997. But I really cannot say when this can be finished. We also want to conduct some econometric analysis. Basically, you say, what we did is an accounting exercise. But what the policymaker really they needed to know how this kind of pattern is determined by what kind of factors. Is the domestic value added income rate is combined with the productivity income rate or other reasons? You see, that's we haven't had time to get into it yet because we have to build a database first. That's the last question. About the SOE, it's a very good question too. It's China is dominated by SOE, you see. But we have another work. Is I did with a professor from Johns Hopkins University, Tang Hai-Wei, and also my colleague in University of International Business and Economics, UIBE. The title of the paper called Domestic Segment of Global Value Chain and in China and the state capitalism. We applied the same methodology, split the IO account, but this time we combine the economic census data. It's not only for the large form, it includes small forms, okay, this time. For 2008 census data, and we split along the SOEs, larger SOE we lump sum together, whatever is large or small. But the foreign form and domestic form, we separate by size, larger form and middle size form. So that paper is available. It's a World Bank policy research working paper. It's available, I think it's in June, in late June. So you can check the website, or you give me your information, I can send a copy to you. The third question. The second question is how we separate how we determine which form is Chinese owned and the foreign owned. It's a very good question, you see. In the Chinese form level data, they have 23 categories. And also they have a control category. So what we do is we basically select the controlled by Chinese or controlled by state or controlled by foreign. We use that one, but we check. If the control, but they have capital structures, but the capital less than, for example, 13%, because the data work is did by my colleague. I forgot, we have threshold. If the share is too low, it's not reasonable. The data determining is controlled by foreign or domestic. We will change them according to the capital structures. That's basically how we determining the domestic and foreign. Finally, is the Reynolds question about the difference between the 3-digit and the 4-digit estimation of domestic value added. So let us recall, basically that is a aggregation bias. For IO table is very simple. They only have one type of coefficient, but maybe few types. You can say the value added coefficient and the IO coefficient. The IO coefficient is what determining the technology. You say, you go to more industries, basically you try to reduce the aggregation bias in one dimension because two industries definitely have two different types of IO coefficient. Then you go to different form types, also give you different IO coefficient. But for statistician's decision is which dimension is the most significant thing. That's you have to determine by the institutional knowledge of the country, by economics, and by statistical technology. Like this time in the paper percent, we try to using some statistical test to determining what is the best organization of the group of firms. But that's very preliminary. So we hope more statisticians can help us in this dimension. Because you see, how you determining the heterogeneity, how you classify the firm, is not only an economic question, it's also a statistical question. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, it works. I guess we will stop here because, I mean, we have some additional comments on household keeping, etc. Before going to the next part of the program, which is more social. I wanted really to thank the panelists for really a very rich, interesting presentation. And I'm a bit frustrated because when you're in the moderation, you're a bit tense and you don't follow the substance because you're trying to look at the logistical aspects, etc. And I have the feeling that I missed part of this very rich presentation. I'm a bit frustrated, but really, thank you very much. It was really good. And ahora tengo que regresar la palabra a los dueños de casa que nos van a hacer un anuncio.
Gracias, Hubert. Thank you very much to very interesting panel presentations. I would like to let you know that we are working very hard, you know, in all the logistics behind the scene, behind the International Conference on Trade and Economic Globalization. So as a result of this effort, INEGI is working together. We are in touch, in fact, with the headquarters of the United Nations in New York, especially with Mark Kim Uriawan. So we have now the good news that the presentation that made yesterday are now in the website of the International Conference in the website. Likewise, the same presentations are in the website of INEGI in the section related to the international events. So it's important that you know. I would like to take in the screen the links. The link is, the first is our link of the website of INEGI, the National Statistical Office of Mexico, and the UNSD site, specifically this linking, this route, in order to get the presentations made yesterday. Tomorrow, our promise is that we will have the presentations of today. The idea is to put immediately the information to benefit everyone in order to review the presentations. I think that is important in order to enrich the discussion because we are here now. And if there is no additional comment from our moderator, now is finishing this day of working. The idea is today enjoying a dinner. Many of you are registered now for a dinner in La Noria Hotel. It's a Mexican food restaurant. Don't worry, it's not spicy. There are many kinds of food, but Mexican. You are in Mexico. So the idea is to enjoy a time, especially to enjoy Aguascalientes, and obviously enjoy your company. Thank you very much for everyone.